A third of the year is officially behind us, and I'm now well ahead of my goal to beat 100 games for the fourth consecutive year. Here are my final thoughts on every game I beat in April of 2023 and their rankings based on how happy they made me. This game makes me feel like I'm watching a child with wonderful potential, like join a gang and sell drugs. There are so many great pieces to this game. There's so much potential there, and it's freaking wasted because the mechanics are broken, the UI is broken, the levels are broken. There's just missing info left and right. I could literally write down 15 different ways that this game is broken. It crashes. You lose progress when it crashes. Like, I lost a half hour once when it crashed. I get stuck in the environment and have to restart. The jumping mechanic is totally broken. It just doesn't work about half the time. The frame rate is like watching a Model T try and race a sports car. It is a nightmare. The only good things about this game are not even the story, because the story, there's just pieces missing. It doesn't make any sense. It's the art direction. That's it. Even the voice acting is terrible. It's got so many things wrong with it, and it just doesn't explain how to do anything. I had to look up like 10 different things that honestly, as soon as I got an ability, it should have popped up with a message say like, press Y to use this. You can now use your flashlight. Press Y to use it. Point it at the doodads. There's nothing like that in it. You just have to figure it out. I actually slammed my controller down on my desk during a recording of this game. I've never done that on a recording or on stream before. This is the maddest I have ever been playing a game. And I have played Cyberhook. There's a couple other ones, but like this game has made me madder than any other game. And if it was just a garbage game, it wouldn't make me mad. I would just stop playing it and forget about it. But this game, I really looked forward to it. It had this. Look at this. We're just sitting in silence now. There's probably supposed to be music. It's just stuff like that. It's just every part of this game is broken in some way. It's barely holding together. They should not have released this game in this state. But even when they patch it, they would have to add significant parts to the story. It's like a lot of it got cut or something for it to make sense. I am going to bury this game in my rankings, and it's going to feel good because I hate this game. I hate this game, and I wouldn't hate it as much if it was just crap. Because if it was just crap, I wouldn't have finished it. But it has some really cool stuff, and I wanted to see it through. Some of the level design is really cool. Some of the puzzles are really good when they work. I don't know where the hell the boss fights were. There were only 2 in the whole game. I mean, what was this game? It's almost like it's like a proof of concept game. And guess what? Proof debunked. It doesn't work. Oh man. This game makes me so angry just thinking about it. I can't wait to put this game out of my mind forever.
Honestly, I don't know how I feel about this game, because it's still an intense challenge, which is good. And it's still like a very unique game, and that gives it value too. But it's so hard on the last level only, and it's so jank that you really have to have a stomach for this era of jank game to even want to try. I'm really actually surprised that I got as far as I did. I guess the reason that I did was that it wasn't really that difficult until the very last level. But that last level was so ridiculously difficult that it was... If it had been that hard from the get-go, no way. No way. I would have given up on it for sure. Man, it makes me wonder whether I want to play the other ones. It's still... I don't know where it's going to rank. It's going to rank pretty low, honestly, probably. But there are some games that have been like this that I have played where they're very playable, very doable until the very end. But at that point, I'm committed because I don't want to give up on it. And there have been a few games like that, and those games have ranked very low. So this one will probably rank pretty low. It's a trap. Basically, the game is a trap. For someone like me that's trying to beat a lot of games, this game is quicksand. It is a sneaky trap. But whatever. It's done. Whatever, it's done now, so I can put it behind me. Am I gonna play Twisted Metal 3? I don't know, I'll think about it. So this game suffers from the same disease that a lot of older NES games suffer from, in that it's got some really cool gameplay mechanics, but the platforming and combat are so jank that it inflates the difficulty of the game ridiculously, and then at the end, it's like it just doesn't want to be beat. It becomes impossibly difficult. It reminds me a lot of Ninja Gaiden. Ninja Gaiden's ending, I don't know anybody who could beat the end of that game fair and square. You've got to spam save. Any reasonable person, unless you're going to spend years on it, maybe, I guess, I don't know. It seems impossible. And that's how the end of this felt, too. The whole gamut at the end of this game, the final level, is just, how can you possibly expect to get through that in 3, 4, 5 lives, however many you've got saved up? There's just no way! Maybe if you've played the game 10 times, 15 times, and you're on your 15th, 16th run, okay, maybe. But as a first-time player, I would have to spend years on this game to try and actually beat it. And I don't have that kind of time. So... was some of the platforming and fun? Yeah, it was. Was the format where you get to choose the levels and you have the boss fights and all that stuff cool? Yeah, totally was. Is this game of a reasonable difficulty? Absolutely not. And the slog at the end of this game loses big points from me. Because it's like, I dare you. It's like it's daring me to try and beat it. I'm going to throw everything I have at you to stop you from beating me. I've played a lot of difficult games. And I've enjoyed them thoroughly. But these games that just will throw absolutely every garbage thing at you to keep you from winning in 3 lives or whatever... It seems unethical. It seems unethical. That's what it feels like to me. It's like I want you to play this game for 40 hours, even though it's a 3-hour game. So I'm going to make the end so hard and give you just a few lives. And we'll see you in 6 years when you figure out how to beat this game. Thank God. Thank God for save states. That's all I have to say. Or I would never even try. I would never even try to play a game like this. Hopefully the newer games aren't like that. Like, as it goes on, it's less like that, but who knows? It's NES, man. They probably all are. At least through 3. I don't know. The first Metro game, or the Redux version of it, I guess more appropriately, is... full of potential in certain ways. Like, the story's confusing but interesting. The premise is really cool. I liked the combat. The weapons were good, especially for the time. That held up pretty well. The way you could do upgrades and get improve your weapons and things like that, that was nice. But man, it had a lot of problems. The game has a lot of problems. It's buggy. It's very buggy. I got stuck in the environment a bunch. There were some like soft lock situations where I had to reload checkpoints in order to get things moving. And the level design is my least favorite part of the game. You just get to a place and it's like, oh, a dead end. I have no idea where to go. And that happened to me, I don't know, 10 times in this game. Like multiple times per level, I would just get to a point. It's like, okay, I'm stuck again. I have no idea where to go. And then when I would find it, it wouldn't be intuitive at all. It would be a hole in the wall or a hole in the floor, or it'd be like a door that looks like 50 other doors that you can't interact with, but that one you just can. Or it would be like a literal crack in the wall that you have to interact with to start an animation where you like crawl through it and stuff like that, where it looks like every other I mean, the walls are full of cracks in this game. So it was a lot of getting stuck. I only actually had to pull up a walkthrough one time, and it was for a really, really dumb thing. And it was just other like UI issues. Like it would flash, or somebody would say something to me that was really important, or it would flash a message on the screen that was like super important and I needed to know about it. And it wouldn't stay on the screen but for like half a second. It's like, oh, well, I hope that wasn't important. That happened all the time. And sometimes it was important. And I either had to figure it out on my own, or in that one case, I had to look it up. So lots of problems, lots of starts and stops, very weird. And then like, honestly, the story, as far as like some of the weirder stuff in the story, as far as I know, they never explained what the hell was going on. Were there aliens in this game? Or ghosts? Or both? I don't really have any fucking idea what was going on. So that, I mean, whatever, that was kind of cool, but I don't understand it, and I don't know how I was supposed to. Probably some stuff in the book. Maybe I should read the book, like I'm ever gonna do that. But I don't know. It had some fun parts. It did. When I think about a game like this, I'm going to compare it to games like the original Far Cry or Half-Life 2 or other games from this era, like first-person shooters from this era that like they have their jank, but they also have their things that make them unique and interesting. And this kind of goes into that category, but I don't think it's as good as either of those games. I don't think. The stories may be a little bit more interesting than something like a Far Cry, but that's all it's got going for it when I put it up against those. So you know, it's not going to rank as high as something like that. But I did enjoy it at parts. I thought at the beginning, the beginning was fun. The first 3 or 4 hours of it I thought were pretty fun, and then toward the end it started getting a bit. But in the middle, it was just a slog. So anyway. What is this? The terms of service? I don't agree. For the most part, this game is more of the same. Picking up from Metro 2033. It really is very similar. I can tell this is a series that 6 months from now, I'm not going to remember which set piece happened in which game. They're going to blend together since I played them back to back. They look and feel almost exactly the same. But there are a couple of important differences, important changes in direction that this game made that make it, in my opinion, better from the first one. The first is that the level design is not as confusing. It's still confusing, but instead of getting lost 15 to 20 times, like I did in the first one, I only got lost 4 or 5 times. So that was a big improvement. It's still a problem, but they shored up that issue a little bit. Second, and probably just as important, they added boss fights in this game. There really weren't any boss fights in the first game. I had to really stretch my definition of what a boss fight was in order to pick a favorite boss from the first game, which is something I do for every game I beat, as long as it has bosses. This game had very clear bosses. There was that little shrimp, the big shrimp guy. There was that thing at the end that I had to fight, the bear. There was the thing that was ramming the pillars. Like, those were like boss arenas, boss fights. And I like that. I like boss fights. So I think that was an improvement to the formula. I think they did a much better job of explaining how to use certain mechanics in the game. There were a number of mechanics in the first game that I completely ignored. I didn't understand when I was supposed to change my filter. I didn't understand how I changed my mask. I didn't understand how to do certain things with guns. I didn't know how to change my throwable equipment until the very end of that game, the first one. This game did a much better job in the tutorials and then later on of like making that more intuitive. So I understood better about why it's important when it's important to have a mask on and why, how to use certain weapons, how to use my equipment, things like that. So I think UI was improved. But those things aside, pretty much more Metro. So I'm very curious to see when I play Exodus at some point how they continue to change the formula, because that's a big jump forward. That's 6 years after the second game came out, right? Yeah. So I don't know when I'll get to that, but I'll get to it at some point. But overall, I thought it was fun. You know, I would put it around something like the original Far Cry, where it was a fun shooter. It feels dated to me now. You know, it's got some jank. It's a little rough around the edges, but yeah, it was still fun. It was good. I didn't really understand most of what was going on in the story, but I also wasn't reading the lore, you know, so that's probably on me. We'll mark that against the game. But yeah, it was fine. It was fine. You know, it was serviceable. The second game was a lot easier than the first one, and normally, in some cases, I wouldn't like that. If it's a game I really like, I don't want it to be too easy, but this game, I didn't really love. It was okay, so I'm happy with it being easier so I can get through it faster. I really like a lot of things about this game. The story was compelling, more compelling than I expected it to be. Visually, it was very interesting. It somehow managed to not be boring, even though there wasn't really much combat, and it's really just platforming that you really can't fail. The dangers were few and far between, but yet it still managed to feel like it had high stakes, so that was cool. The puzzles were pretty good. I would say 7 to 8 out of 10. The puzzles, most of them. I was really interested to continue on and see where this was all heading, and there are some parts that actually hit me in the feels a little bit harder than I was expecting it to. So a lot of good things. Now, does this game impress me as much as something that's like in my wheelhouse, like an action RPG or a Souls-like or a Metroidvania or a roguelike or something like that? No, this really needs to be judged by a different standard, because it's not really competing with that kind of a game, you know. But it's still pretty video gamey for an indie title, and I would count this as an indie title, even though it got a lot of hype when it came out. It's still pretty video game. It's not like a lot of indie games that I've played where it's just like you basically just hit X to watch the interactive movie, you know. There's a lot of indie games like that. This wasn't like that. This is a game that it was a video game, you know. It felt like a video game. A lot more than a lot of indie games do, and it was gratifying in that way, especially the puzzles. And I did get pretty frustrated toward the end, because the differences in the length of the chapters is just logistically a problem for me as someone that does these recordings, and like am trying to take care of my children. But that's that's 90% a me problem. I do think there's something to be said for an issue where games have levels or chapters that are that vary wildly in length. I do think that that's less than ideal. But it just happens to be a big pet peeve of mine based on the way that I approach video games. So I recognize that most of that's me. So I really don't have a lot of big negative things to say about the game. I have a couple of little nitpicks, but overall, quite enjoyable. Quite enjoyable. For what it was, couldn't really have asked for much more. The first half of this game was pretty close to perfect. It was a lot of more of the same from the first game, which is a good thing, but it built on it in interesting ways. Different weapon skills, that kind of thing, an interesting story. All of that was great, no problems. About halfway through the game, it decided to do this thing where, you remember that part in the first God of War where you have to push that guy in a cage up the hill while you're fighting, and it's annoying as hell, or at least it was for me. I hated it. Well, this game does that kind of thing like 9 times during the second half of this game, and I hated it. It was so frustrating to the point that I'm yelling at full volume, wanting to throw my controller, because the game is forcing me to solve puzzles and do platforming challenges while doing combat with enemies that respawn indefinitely. I don't know who the people are that like that, but it certainly isn't me. I hated it. And the game just leaned really hard into that for like the last several bosses. There were a couple of notable exceptions, but like a lot of the bosses were like that. Like it was like I wasn't even doing just able to do just combat or just puzzle solving or just platforming at the end of the game. It was making me do all of that at once. And hey, I love hard games. Souls-likes are my favorite genre. I've beaten a lot of hard games. They're some of my favorite games of all time. But there's a difference between something being difficult in a fair way and this, what is essentially a gank fight mentality while you're trying to solve puzzles and do platforming challenges that just isn't fun for me. I just didn't enjoy it. So the second half of this game, I didn't like it. I didn't like the second half. Is this still a good game? Yeah, it is. Are those problems maybe more me problems than the game problems? Perhaps. Perhaps. There probably are people that enjoy that kind of challenge. But I do not like multitasking. That's why I don't like real-time strategy games. I don't like tactical lots of anything, because I don't really enjoy that multitasking aspect. So that really lost at some points for me. Hopefully the later games don't do that, because I'm going to play them all. But woof, man, the second half was a slog for me that I did not enjoy, and so the ranking's going to suffer for that. As far as like how I feel, how happy it made me, you know. It was still a good game. And, you know, at its core, all of the mechanics and everything were still great. You know, if the second half had been like the first half, I would have ranked it probably even higher than God of War 1, but it's not going to rank as high as God of War 1 now. Nope. And you know, maybe it is a preference thing, but whatever the case, whatever the reason, I did not enjoy the second half, except outside of a couple of boss fights. This game holds up very well. It's not every game from 2007 that plays as well as this game does. You can tell how influential this game is when it comes to traversal mechanics, combat, all kinds of other things. It's clearly a very important game, and it's still a very fun game. It does have some jank. You know, it's a little rough around the edges in a couple of spots, but not too bad. Not too bad. It's a nice setup for the rest of the games, which I've only played the fourth one, but I'll get to the rest of them eventually. And it's just really well done. It's well acted. It's well technically. It's well done. It's a fun story. I really don't have a lot of complaints. There's a couple of parts of the game that were a slog, but most games have those, one or two of those parts. This game was no different. Chapters 15 and 16 specifically were a little rough for me, but most of it was great. And it's if I was going to really be nitpicky, I might say the game's a little bit easy. It almost feels like it's more about the story than like the challenge. I say that I died 131 times, but most of those were just really quick mistakes. I never really got stuck, except in chapters 15 and 16. But that wasn't because of the difficulty of the game. It was because the path forward was unclear. But that's real nitpicky. I mean, the game's super fun. It's a great game. If you've played any of the other later ones, you'd probably enjoy this one. It's got a little quality of life stuff that's missing from the later games, but other than that, it's great. It's great. No complaints at all. I really enjoyed it. This was a really, really fun game. The story was fun. It didn't take itself too seriously. The combat was surprisingly satisfying for that, like, flail and, kind of Skyrim type combat where you're just swinging in front of you. It didn't really feel like that. Most games like this do. The original Dead Island, the Dying Light games, they're a lot more like, you just see your arm in front of you. This felt like it had more weight to it, maybe because of, how obvious it was when you were damaging zombies. I don't know, but it was the combat was surprisingly satisfying. The loot was really good. I always like that kind of thing in a game. The loot progression was good and well paced. It was fun and it was well paced. Like, you didn't really start getting the really good stuff until late in the game, and I like that. I don't think I like it as much as like the first Dying Light, but the first Dying Light with the parkour and everything was so addictive for me that's hard to top. This, because it didn't have any of that parkour stuff, there was an element that was missing. It would have been weird for that to be in this game, but that was something I really liked in Dying Light that kind of put it over something like this. But I think the loot grind was better in this game. There were more interesting, unique abilities with weapons and things like that were really cool. But I think I do like this game probably more than something like Dying Light 2. Because that one, although it still had the parkour and stuff, it wasn't as... the story wasn't as interesting to me. The loot grind wasn't as interesting to me in the second game. I think this is kind of in between those two games. You have to compare this to Dying Light. You have to. But I would say that it's better than the original Dying Light in every single way. So, and it was funny. I thought it was funny. It was great. I loved my character. I'm sure the other protagonists that you pick are great too, but my character, Danny, was awesome. She was great. Yeah, great game. Great, really good. This is definitely a game that if I were not trying to beat 100 games every year, I would have taken my time with this one, because this is exactly my kind of game. If I'd played this 5 or 6 years ago, it would have been something that I would have put a lot of time into. But even just playing just the main story stuff and like 2 side quests, I still really enjoyed it. I had a really great time with it. It was good. A lot of personality. More than your average game, that's for sure. Of all the Limbo likes, which, when I say that, you know what I mean. We're talking Limbo, Inside, Little Nightmares, and other games like that. Black the Fall. There's several others. I think of all of those, this is probably my favorite, and I'll tell you why. It's not because of the puzzles or the platforming. The puzzles and the platforming were fine. They were good. They maybe were not mind-blowing, but they were good. They were there. But really, it's the visual presentation and the excellent way that they build suspense and fear in this game. I don't remember Little Nightmares 1 being this scary. I was scared, legitimately scared for a bunch of this game, way more than a lot of the survival horror games I've played recently. The only game I've played recently that scared me, I would say, as much as this, would probably be the original Silent Hill. And this has that kind of weird, ethereal, supernatural quality to it, where it's, you know, we're not dealing with zombies or, you know, werewolves. This is like a weird otherworldly feel, and it's very effective. I would say, I'm gonna have to look, but I think I like this better than Inside, and I ranked Inside pretty high. I don't remember if I ranked that higher than Little Nightmares or not, but I think I like this better than both of them. As far as just that like weird twisted Coraline type art style, where everything is like childlike but also grotesque. Very well done. I love that they added combat. Mild combat. I thought that was really fun and cool. Those were some of my favorite parts. Probably the school was my favorite chapter if I'm thinking about it now. I loved that part of the game. I think it was maybe the scariest too. I don't understand the ending, but that's not that big of a deal. I mean, the story is pretty amorphous anyway. It seems like ambiguous. Excellent game. Now, as far as where it's going to rank against other great horror games that I've played, I don't know. Like, where's it going to rank against The Quarry? Where's it going to rank against Silent Hill? Where's it going to rank against Little Hope? I'm not sure, because some of those games are ranked pretty high. But either way, as far as like this subgenre of game, these limbo likes, I think this is about as good as I've ever played. So I loved it. Perfect length too. You don't want a game like this to last 17 hours, you know. Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. The Surge 2 is pretty much just more Surge. 90% of what I liked and disliked about the first Surge is present here. They really haven't changed much, but there are a couple of things that they did change importantly that are worth noting, and the most important is that they added more bosses. That made me happy. Having more bosses in there was a lot of fun. It wasn't a ton more bosses. It wasn't like an Elden Ring level of bosses, but it was a healthy number. It was more than like 5 or whatever the first one had. So that was nice. And the boss fights, I think, were better too overall. They still weren't the best Souls-like bosses ever or anything. They had some imperfections for sure, but the boss fights were better. The boss fights were pretty decent, particularly toward the second half of the game. I thought that most of the other stuff about the game, most of the other reasons that I still think most of the things that I didn't like about the Surge 1 were present here too. Like the level design was lacking, the gear and loot upgrade was okay, but it could have been a lot better. The combat is really clunky. It's like it's designed to make it feel like you're playing with someone that doesn't know how to fight, which for authenticity's sake is interesting, you know, because you're not a warrior in this game. So for the, you know, it's authentic, I guess, but for the sake of fun, it's hard to justify. So is it my favorite Souls-like? No, of course not. Is it my least favorite Souls-like? No, because the Surge 1 exists. But I still, Souls-like is my favorite genre, so I still really like the Surge, but the Surge holds the moniker currently of being my least favorite Souls-like. And I don't know, I'd have to think about whether, well, this one is an improvement. This one is an improvement, simply, if nothing else, just because of the boss fights. really, other than that, it was just more Surge, which is fine, which is good. It was fun. You know, I enjoyed it. It will rank well. The Surge one ranked well, even though it's my least favorite Souls-like. So this one will rank even better. I enjoyed it. It was fun. This game was pretty solid from start to finish, except for the final boss. I did not like that at all, so it's going to lose some points for that. But outside of that, it was pretty pristine from start to finish. I really enjoyed the boss fights. I really enjoyed the story. I really enjoyed the visual presentation. The puzzles were clever and the right amount of difficulty. There was a lot going for this game. I do think there were a couple things that held it back, besides the final boss fight. The combat was pretty simple. I would even go as far as to say that it was boring when it comes to like the melee combat. With the bombs and the arrows and everything, it gave it some variety that was much needed, but still, at the end of the day, I found myself just whacking away at enemies a lot because that was the best way to deal a lot of damage in a lot of situations, and that was boring. So I think the combat suffered a little bit because there was no weapon variety or anything like that. I'm not saying this game had to put in like an RNG rarity loot system or anything, but if they had just had some weapon options like Asterigos does, that would have helped a lot, immensely. Different, at least just, maybe just 2 or 3 different move sets would have been nice. Maybe like a light weapon and a heavy weapon. Something like that would have been really nice. And I feel like they could have figured out a way to do that within the context of the story. So I think that held it back a little bit. I think beyond that, I think that this game had some opportunities to transcend and be a really excellent game, and it just didn't capitalize on those. The combat is one reason. I just feel like the level design is another one. The level design was either very linear or just a lot of if you're in the open world, it's just kind of like there's some stuff to do, but it's not like those labyrinthine levels that you would get in a Souls-like or a Metroidvania, or it's just kind of like the world is kind of open and it's kind of there and there's things to do, but it's like it's not that deep, it's not that interesting. It's very easy to just be tempted to blow past all that in a game like this. Like, there are some games where I'll get sucked into the open world and want to do everything in it for at least a while. I never really felt that pull in this game because the open world didn't have that much in it, really, and what it did have was pointless. That was another big problem. What's with this currency that there's so much focus on that all you can buy with it is cosmetics, and only one kind of cosmetic? Hats for my little rot people, which I know that there are definitely people out there that care a lot about that. I am not one of those people. So I think it lost some points. There's a lot of ways that this game could have really transcended and been awesome. But instead of that, I still think it's a great game. I just don't think it's an awesome game. But it was still definitely worth playing. This is a top 25 game. This game is one of the best video games I've ever played, and I'll tell you why. It's the perfect blend of action and stealth. They've got all the stealth mechanics down to such a fine detail that it's very satisfying while still being challenging and nuanced. So that's perfect. It's this perfect blend of kind of a children's fairy tale and this horrible hellscape. It's just this interesting kind of like classic Grimm's fairy tale job of like blending these like terrible imagery with a children's story that is very unsettling and disturbing. And the combat does something that almost no other game has done, in that it is totally unique but still satisfying. Most games that try to take a different spin on combat, it's not as fun. I think about like the first Ori game where they didn't have traditional melee combat, or The Chant, which was a game that was okay, but it did not have traditional combat. It had a weird kind of combat where you used like different herbs and stuff, and it just wasn't that fun. It was very interesting and unique, but it wasn't as fun as your standard combat. Somehow this game has done a great job of making a totally unique combat system that is super fun. This is a great game. I think it's even better than the original. Technically and narratively, this game is also top tier. The voice acting by every single character was on point. The visual design of the characters, the landscapes, the rats, whatever physics is running the rats is incredible. The performances were all just perfect. All of the characters were interesting and nuanced. All of them, except for maybe Lucas. Lucas is pretty one-dimensional, but everybody else, all of the other characters are interesting, nuanced. All of the villains have understandable motivations. The more gray area characters you understand why they do the good things they do and why they do the bad things they do. It's very, very... I think this game is a good example of how, at some point maybe in the future, a video game could reach the levels of an Oscar-worthy work of art. It is narratively... I mean, the story is kind of crazy, right? But shit, the story was kind of crazy in The Shape of Water. So it's not any crazier than that. It's very well done. I mean the end is, it got me a little bit. And that doesn't happen. And I am someone that doesn't care normally that much about the story. It's only the top, I don't know, 30 or 40 games that I've ranked and only a few of those really that really get to me when it comes to the story. So I in trying to think of things that are wrong with this game, there are maybe some minor nitpicks when it comes to the mechanics, but I honestly can't think of any right now. The pacing was a little bit weird at times. Like some of the chapters are 6 times longer than some other chapters, but again, that's the worst I can think of to say. Everything else about this game is absolutely amazing. So, it's a top 25 game for sure. Beyond that, I don't know, but we'll see where we rank it. But
that's it for the month of April, and it brings us to a total of 42 games beaten so far in 2023. Have you already beaten any of these games? And if so, did you feel differently about them than I did? Let me know about it in the comments, and be sure to subscribe for more gaming videos. Thanks for watching!